Okay guys, Miss Monsterati here with The Wind in the Willows, Chapter 7. It's by Kenneth, Grahame, and it's retold by Ellen Miles. Chapter 7, Toad's Adventures. Toad was in jail, all alone in a dark, damp cell in the middle of a large, castle-like building with many gates and guards. He had plenty of time to think about what a mess he'd made of things. How smart and kind his friends had been, how thoughtless he had been. He deserved to be in jail. He refused to eat and spent all his time crying and telling himself what a bad toad he was. Now the warden had a daughter who helped her father at the jail. She loved animals, and she felt sorry for Toad. She begged her father to let her take care of him. The warden was tired of Toad's sulking and crying, so he was glad to say yes. Later that day, the warden's daughter brought Toad his dinner. So the warden is a person that's in charge at jail. Now cheer up, Toad, she said. Dry your eyes and be a sensible animal. Try to eat some dinner. See what I brought? Toad lay on the floor, kicking and crying, but the stew she had brought him smelled very good. Maybe life wasn't all bad. He had his friends, and maybe they would be able to help. The world was a wonderful place, and with luck he could be free to enjoy it again someday. After all, he was Toad. Smart, wonderful Toad. Everything would work out. Toad sat up and dried his eyes. He began to eat, and he began to talk about himself and his house and how important he was and how great his friends thought he was. The warden's daughter saw how happy it made him to boast. "Tell me about Toad Hall," she said. "It sounds beautiful." So he told her about the boathouse and the fish pond and the garden, about the dining hall, and the fun the other animals had there when they were gathered around the table. And Toad was at his best, singing songs and telling stories. Then she wanted to know about his animal friends, and he told her all about them and how they lived. By the time she said good night, Toad was himself again. He sang a little song or two, and then fell asleep, and had all kinds of happy dreams. Toad and the warden's daughter became friends after that. She felt sorry for him. Of course, he thought she was in love with him. One morning she said, "Toad, listen, I have an aunt who is a washerwoman." "There, there," said Toad graciously. "That's all right. Nothing to be ashamed of." "Oh, be quiet, Toad," said the girl. "My aunt does the washing for all the prisoners here. She takes out the washing on Monday morning and brings it back on Friday evening. This is a Thursday. Now this is what I think. You're very rich and she's very poor. I think you could make a deal with her. She could lend you her dress and bonnet, a bonnet's a hat, and you could escape from the castle as the official washerwoman. You do look alike." Toad was insulted. "But Mr. Toad of Toad Hall can't go around disguised as a washerwoman." "Then you can stay here as a toad," she replied. Toad knew when he was wrong. "You are a good, kind, smart girl," he said, "and I am a stupid toad. I would love to meet your aunt." The next night the warden's daughter brought her aunt to Toad's cell. He gave her some money, and she gave him a dress, an apron, a shawl, and an old black bonnet. "Now it's your turn, Toad," said the girl. Take off that coat of yours. You're fat enough as it is." Shaking with laughter, she helped Toad put on the clothes, then sent him on his way. The disguise worked perfectly, and Toad was out of the jail before he knew it. Still dressed in the washerwoman's clothes, he walked toward town. He headed straight for the train station to buy a ticket for a train home. That was when he realized he had left all his money in the pocket of his coat back at the jail. He tried to convince the ticket seller that he could pay later, after he'd been home, but it was no use. Toad watched the train get ready to leave without him, feeling terrible. How could this have happened? Now he would probably be caught again and thrown back into jail. As he walked along to the train, he came to the engine. The engineer was standing nearby. "Hello there," said the engineer. "What's the matter? You don't look happy." "Oh, sir," said Toad, starting to cry, "I am a poor, unhappy washerwoman, and I lost all my money, and I can't pay for a ticket, and I have to get home tonight, somehow. What am I going to do?" "That's too bad," said the engineer. Right, the engineer is a person who drives the train. "Lost your money and can't get home. You probably have some kids waiting for you, too." "Lots of them," sobbed Toad, "and they'll be hungry and playing with matches and fighting." "Well, I'll tell you what I'll do," said the engineer. "You say you're a washerwoman. Well, I'm an engineer, and it's dirty work. My wife gets awfully tired of washing all my clothes. If you'll wash a few shirts for me when you get home, I'll give you a ride on my engine." Toad scrambled up to the cab of the engine, happy again. Of course, he had never washed a shirt in his life and didn't know how, but he thought he could send the engineer some money instead. That would be just as good. Soon the train moved out of the station, and as they picked up speed, Toad watched fields and trees and hedges and cows and horses fly by, and he knew every minute was bringing him nearer to Toad Hall, and good friends and money and a soft bed to sleep in, and good things to eat, and the chance to tell everyone how smart he had been. He began to skip up and down and sing, which surprised the engineer. Then Toad noticed that the engineer had a puzzled expression on his face. He was leaning over the side of the engine and listening hard. Then he stuck his head out the window to look back. "It's very strange," he said. "We're the last train tonight, but I could swear that I heard another train following us." Toad stopped skipping. He stopped singing. He didn't even want to think about who might be on that other train. The engineer kept watching. "Yes, it is another train," he said. "I think it's chasing us." Toad groaned. "They're catching up," cried the engineer, "and it's full of policemen, all calling, 'Stop! Stop! Stop!'" Toad fell to his knees and begged. Save me, dear kind Mr. Engineer. I am not a simple washerwoman. I have no children waiting for me. I am a Toad, the well-known Mr. Toad. I have just escaped from a terrible dungeon. If they catch me, I'll be locked up again." The engineer looked at him very sternly and said, "Now tell the truth. What were you put in prison for?" "Nothing much," said Toad, blushing. "I just borrowed a motor car while the owners were at lunch. I didn't mean to steal it." The engineer looked very serious and said, "You have been a very bad Toad, and I should turn you in. But you're in trouble, and I won't desert you. I don't like motor cars for one thing, and I don't like being ordered about by policemen for another. And the sight of an animal in tears always makes me feel soft-hearted. So cheer up, Toad. I'll do my best. We might beat them yet." He pushed the train to top speed, but the other train was still catching up. Finally, he turned to Toad and told him that his best chance was to jump off the train just after it came out of the next tunnel. As soon as they came out of the tunnel, Toad jumped, rolled down a short bank, picked himself up, and scrambled into the woods and hid. Then, out of the tunnel burst the other engine, roaring and whistling, the policemen shouting, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" When they were past, Toad had a good laugh for the first time since he was thrown into jail. But he soon stopped laughing when he realized that it was now very late and dark and cold, and he was in an unknown forest with no money and no chance of supper, and still far from friends and home. He was afraid to leave the shelter of the trees, so he headed into the woods, even though they seemed dark and scary. Toad was tired and angry and hungry, too. Finally, he crawled inside a hollow tree, made himself a bed from branches and dead leaves, and fell asleep. The next chapter is called Wayfarer's Hall, Chapter 8.